Good evening, everyone. I'm Kenya Johnson, the proud president of the Brooklyn Alumni chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, and I want to welcome our special guest tonight, four-star admiral and our honorary soror, Soror Michelle Howard. So I want to welcome you, soror, and welcome all the guests with us this evening. This is a special moment for the chapter and for everyone involved and myself. As I awakened this morning and thought about my day, the schedule for my day, and I thought of you, Sora Howard, that over all these years and where you have achieved within the military, took a lot of endurance, and a lot of discipline. Myself, I was only an Army reservist for 8 years. And to
Hoo-ha!
me, that was a lot.
Hoo-ha!
That was a lot. So I thought about everything I went through just in that small time of frame, right? And how it built me up, right? As a person, as a Black woman in the military, and thought about I couldn't imagine everything that you endured climbing up the ladder in a military environment as a Black woman and the only Black woman to reach this level. So I want to commend you on that. And I'm excited to hear all that you have to say and share of your journey. So welcome again. And Sora Nicole Duncan-Smith, you can begin.
Sora Sims.
Hello, everyone. We would just like to welcome you to this special Red Talk. Special welcome to from the Arts and Letters Committee. Thank you so much, Admiral Michelle Howard. We appreciate your attendance and we look forward to this conversation that we're about to have.
Thank you.
And now we will have a small video, short video about your life.
Boy, you got to pay attention and listen and understand. Sometimes to be an effective leader, you've literally got to negotiate to get people to be on your team.
In 1999, Admiral Michelle Howard made history when she captained the dock landing ship USS Rushmore with a crew of more than 400 sailors, becoming the first African-American woman to command a U.S. Navy ship. Admiral Howard went on to become the first female four-star admiral to command operational forces when she assumed command of U.S. Naval Forces Europe and Naval Forces Africa before retiring in 2017.
You know, if you want to go fast, you go alone. But if you want to go far, you go together. With leadership from a different culture, we've got to go together if we're going to go far.
Good evening, everyone. I hope you all are as excited as I am to bring forth Admiral Howard, who is an amazing, amazing woman, just across the board. Let me just give you a little bit of her bio. It's 1982. She was a Naval Academy graduate and became the first Black woman to command the U.S. Navy combatant ship U.S. Rushmore in 1999. She was the first woman promoted to the rank of four-star admiral in 2014. Upon her promotion, Soror Howard became the highest-ranking woman. I said woman, not just Black woman in the armed forces, in all of the history of the armed forces, and the highest-ranking Black woman in the Navy history. She served as VCNO from 2014 to 2016. She became the first woman four-star admiral to command operational forces when she assumed command of both the U.S. Naval Forces Europe Naval Forces Africa, and Allied Joint Forces Command in Naples with NATO from 2016 to 2017. She's now retired. She retired in 2017 after nearly 36 years of service. So, Soror Howard, we are so excited to have you here. And I am interested in just having this amazing time with you. So welcome.
Well, thank you, Nicole, and thank you, Madam President. And thank you for the video clip there. So if you wrap that up, I'll just save that for my eulogy. And then that'll save the speaker some time. So hello and good evening, everyone. My background, I retired to my home state of Colorado. That's why there's snow and trees out the back. But I've got friends in Brooklyn, so I know it can be just as beautiful there this time of the year. Once you get the snow, right? So the one thing I don't think you guys mentioned, and the intro, you did mention I was an honorary soror, but I want to make sure you all know I am the ace of the Justice League. So
that's right. You let them know. You let them know. You let them know.
That's right. And so it was number 5, Colette Victory Smith, who got me in touch with you guys. And it's the whole experience of being an honorary Delta. But to me, it's my line that has made this a blessing and a joy. So what I'd like to do is just in the Navy, we call them sea stories. I'm going to tell you some family stories and sea stories, and then I'll open it up for questions. And I've got the chat window up, so I can, once I finish talking, if you want to punch them in, or if you just want to come online, that works as well. So let me walk you through how this all started for me. It was 1972. My dad was an Air Force Master Sergeant, and we retired here to Colorado. My mother had started working in the post office, and I was just trying to figure out at age 12 what I wanted to do. And society was changing a lot at that time. Women were marching in the street for the Equal Rights Amendment, and they were burning their bras. And at age 12, I did not understand that because I had just gotten my bra. So I was like, whoa, what's going on? And I would say women were just starting to move into the workplace in non-traditional roles. So 72, there's still no women Supreme Court Justice. Sandra Day O'Connor hasn't happened yet. There's still no Sally Ride astronaut. She hasn't happened yet. Well, then I am watching television and I see this documentary, and it's about, I believe it was about the Air Force Academy, which is located here in Colorado. But I was just enthralled with the mission and the leadership and teamwork and the marching, all of it, the uniforms. And I was probably, to be honest, a little bit enthralled with the idea of being in charge. So I went to my older brother, who was my best friend, and said, look, I know what I want to do when I get older. I want to go to a service academy. And he goes, you can't go. You can't go. Girls aren't allowed. And I thought he was messing with me. So I go find my mother, and I go, Mom, I want to go to a service academy. And Michael says I can't go. And she said, honey, he's telling you the truth. It's against the law. And it was. Women were forbidden from going to service academies by law in 1972. And I was in shock. I'm like, I could keep up with my brothers on my bike. Why can't I go do this thing? So my mother said, okay, you're only 12. You could change your mind. But if you don't, this is what I think you should do. When you're old enough, you can apply. And then if you're rejected because you're a woman, we'll sue the government. And that was a big idea for me. And she goes, no, wait, there's more. She said, Michelle, why don't you think about this? If you apply and you're rejected and we sue the government, she goes, it could take years to get to the Supreme Court. And even if they agree with you and say women could go, by that point, you might be too old to go. But other women will get to go. And she said, that is just as important. And that was the plant of this idea in my mind that you have to go after whatever you think is right. And it's not about, oh, this is going to benefit me. There's benefits to the community when you go after and do the right thing. And sometimes you can end up changing the world. In my brother's version of this story, he always says the world changes to suit me. In this case, it did. The law was repealed in 1976. I applied in 1977, and I started Annapolis in 1978. So that was, my first big desire and first big push to go on this big adventure of, defending the Constitution and defending our country. So one of the things that I realized as I started Annapolis was there weren't a lot of women. At the time, well, one, for the service academies, I was in that third group of women who had just been initiated and started. But overall, the Navy was only about 5% women at the time. And there's other legal reasons for that. So the reason the Navy and the other services are shaped the way they are with women right now, the origins go back to World War II. So after the war, Congress stood up a commission. They said every time we have a war, World War I, World War II, we bring women in as reservists, and then we discharge them at the end of the war. We know if there's going to be another war, we're going to need women again. So why don't we just have a permanent cohort on active duty? So there was debates, and then by 1948, Congress passed a law, the Women's Armed Forces Integration Act. And for my service that July, the first 7 women in the United States Navy raised their hand and became active duty sailors and officers. However, there were some caveats, being Congress. What they said was women can be part of the service, but they can be no more than 2% of the total armed forces. Because, if we were 3%, we would have taken over. The other thing they said is women were not allowed to be generals or admirals, period. The highest ranking woman could be a captain or colonel, and only one at a time. And then the last thing they said, which more people today are familiar with, is women could not serve in combat. So for the Navy, you couldn't serve on a combatant ship, and you couldn't fly combatant aircraft. You couldn't be a fighter jet jockey, for example. So then the law that put the cap on women for rank didn't get repealed to 1967. The Navy didn't have its first woman 1-star till 1972, the year I'm looking at this documentary on TV, and she was the head of the Nurse Corps, Aileen Dirk. They didn't have their first competitive woman 1-star until I was a midshipman at the Naval Academy, Admiral McKee. And she actually came to inspect all the women midshipmen. We were so excited. So there's actually a woman admiral. But Admiral McKee had served ashore her entire life. She'd been in administrative work. So because of the combat exclusion law, while I was a midshipman, the Navy had said, well, women can't serve on combatant ships, but let's simplify the policy. Let's have it that women don't serve on any ships except for the hospital ship. So by the time I've started Annapolis, women who were doctors and nurses could be stationed on the hospital ship, but there was no going to any other ship for the rest of us. We were going to be intel officers or supply corps officers who couldn't serve at sea. So when you talk about people doing the right thing, in the 70s, about the time I started Annapolis, a second-class petty officer sued the Navy to be allowed to go to sea. Her logic was this. She said, look, the law prohibits us from being on combatant ships, but there's support ships. There's salvage ships, there's test platforms, and all these support ships, they don't deploy. They go to sea. They do work. Like there was a training carrier where you would do the beginning training and deck carrier qualifications for officers out of Pensacola, but it didn't deploy. It just served at sea around Florida and the Gulf. She said, look, we should be allowed to serve on those ships and have an opportunity to use our technical skills at sea, just the way the men do. She actually, God bless her, went to the Navy first and got turned down, and then decided to sue. And she won. The court agreed with her. The law says combatant ships, not all ships. So then while I was a midshipman, the law changed and ships opened up to women. So when I graduated in '82, I started sea duty right from the get-go. My first ship was a maintenance ship in Holy Loch, Scotland. So thank goodness for people who are willing to do the right thing and help change the world. Well, the other thing that happened during the 70s was the removal of conscription and the beginning of the all-volunteer force. When that happened, this 2% cap on women went away. But women only slowly started to come into the services. So that's why when I was a midshipman, the Navy was only about 5% male. It's about 22% female. I'm sorry, 5% female. It's only about 22% female today. But we now serve across all of the positions, from submarines to aircraft carriers. We've had carrier strike group commanders, and of course, most delightful for me, the chief of the Navy, Chief of Naval Operations, is a woman, Admiral Lisa Franchetti. She's the first woman to be a chief of any service. So just unbelievable how far the services have come. Now, one of the questions I get a lot is, hey, why aren't there more women? Well, although the opportunities opened up, and trust me, one of my classmates ended up heading up the Seabees, and another woman I ran into rose to the rank of 2-star as a diver, an explosive ordnance demolition expert. What it comes down to for all of the services is how desirable is it among women to join the military? And so we recruit, and I think we do a pretty good job, which is probably why we're 22% female right now. But going into the military, serving at sea, or serving, in the infantry is definitely not for everyone. Just this way, it's not for everyone to want to be a firefighter or a police officer. So we tend to get the more athletic, outdoor type, risk-taking, and people who, like me when I was young, want to grow up to be in charge, are looking for leadership opportunity or the sense of teamwork. And you get that in spades in the Navy, whether you're on a ship or aircraft carrier or a aviation squadron or a submarine. So then I'm going to tell you one sea story, I think, about why I stayed in, because it's one of the questions, and then about Madam President talked about challenges that obviously came my way, and I will tell you once again, it was my mother who was instrumental in me making this decision. So coming out of Desert Storm, and Desert Storm was my first war. I was on an ammunition ship, because that's when we could only serve on support ships. Congress said, wow, we had women prisoners of war in Desert Storm. We had women who were killed in combat. Maybe the combat exclusion law should go away. So they formed a commission. I had just gone ashore and I was in a policy shop. But because at that point I had served on 4 different ships and 2 of them deployers, I was made the spokesperson for the Navy on anything to do with the commission or women in combat at sea. And I will tell you, initially I was not happy, because I'm like, I'm not a public affairs person. I'm an operator. And they're like, that's exactly who we need in front of the camera. Someone who's been there and done it, not someone who has read about it. So because of this commission, the Navy was literally receiving hundreds of letters a month, congressional inquiries, people for women going on to combatant ships and people against it. And part of my job was to make sure all that mail was answered. And then I was doing all these interviews, and not just US media, but interviews from people around the world who were interested in the US government looking at putting women into combatant ships or flying combatant aircraft. And then I was working 7 days a week, and I was not happy because my male counterparts were not. And I was on the phone and I was just venting to my mother. I'm like, God, this is unfair. I'm on the job 7 days a week and it's too much. And she was like, stop. She said, Michelle, you got into this thing right at the beginning. And now, even though you're a lieutenant commander, mid-grade officer, major in the other services, she said, you're at the pointy end of all of this change. She said, so you're going to be the most senior woman for the rest of your time in your career, or you're going to have to quit. She said, the Navy's giving you a lot. She goes, so now you're going to have to give back, and it's going to take a lot. She said, but if you don't embrace this, you're going to drive yourself crazy. And I was like, Mom, supposed to be sympathetic, but she was giving me good advice. She's right. I was in that first group of women who went to sea. So it was only a matter of time before one of us was going to be the first one to command a ship. One of us was going to be the first one to command a group, as long as we stayed in and performed well. So I took her advice, embraced it. And in that point, I had a change in myself. I said, I've got to stop thinking about the burden, but also think about the opportunity. Can I from now on, and not just as a spokesperson, but as one of the more senior women officers, even though I was mid-grade, be an advocate for women in the Navy? And that, I will tell you by reputation, that stayed with me all the way, even up to when I was vice chief. Can we get more women in the Navy? What do we have to do? And how do we open up more opportunity for women? So, my mother just was a wonderful cheerleader for me my entire career. And then I married a little later. I was 29 when I got married, and then my husband took over lead cheerleading roles. He's a Marine. And one thing I will tell you, if you think it's hard to be the first woman 4-star in the Navy, it is a lot harder on the first male spouse of the 4-star. So thank God he's a Marine, because he knows how to, deflect negative feedback. And whether it was about me or, about the two of us in this groundbreaking team role. So let me stop there and take some of your questions. And chat's moving quick. Hang on. And
Soror, I have a question for you.
sure, go ahead.
As the first, okay, so here, how has the U.S. Navy evolved in terms of promoting diversity and inclusion during your career, and what work still needs to be done to ensure that there's more equitable, it's a more equitable environment for underrepresented groups?
So it's very interesting that each of the services has a very different way on how they promote. And I will tell you, having, because in a joint environment, you have people from other services working for you, I'm very happy with how the Navy goes about it. So what we do, central promotion. So when a group of people are going to go, say, from 04 to 05 or captain to admiral, we bring in representatives from around the Navy, and they have to be one rank higher than the promotion rank. We require that those representatives, that there has to be women on the board, there has to be minorities on the board. And because of the law that says so many people have to be joint, there have to be people with joint experience on the board. The Secretary of the Navy puts out the precepts, and we are looking for the best qualified, best performing people. We also have rule sets. So when you think about it, it takes a long time to grow up in a community, and you don't get a choice of where you have borders. So if for some reason a person was in support because the law was there for a while, what we say is you can't hold the fact that they weren't mainline against them. It's in the actual language of the board. Then when we do promotion, we do a process that batches. Everybody gets a briefer for their record. There's a secret vote. We come up with the scattergram. We take the top slice, and then we normally have spots left. We rebrief the records, take another vote, and then we get this cascading effect of who the top people are out of every group to fill the slots. Then before the board disbands, we look at the demographics. You know, if you had 20% of the group was female that was going up for promotion, did approximately 20% of them get promoted? If there's X amount of a particular minority group going up for promotion, did that approximate amount also get promoted? So doesn't mean there's times where those metrics aren't met, but the board has to really nug their way through and say, yep, we are very satisfied that we've met the criteria and that there's been opportunity for everyone. And that works when I say minority, it may not be female or person of color. So for example, we have a pretty substantial healthcare group. We have a very large nurse care community, but 75% of the nurses are female, which means 25% of our nurses are male. So when they go up for promotion, if about 25% of the cohort, which is male, isn't promoting, you realize there's something going off. So we have all these systems in place to make sure there is equity in the promotion system. And then we have DEI training. But we realized that when you're looking at how do you get change at the senior ranks, it's got to start at the accessions. ROTC, Naval Academy produces in the end most of the admirals. So if you don't have a diverse group at the Service Academy, you're never going to have a diverse group at the senior leadership. And it takes about 25 years to make 1 star, and 25 to 30 years to make 1 star, and then and then subsequent years to go beyond that. So I will tell you, the Navy started looking at who's coming into Annapolis, where are we recruiting from, who's getting nominated about 20 years ago. And the classes now are run around 25, 30% female. But for example, this class that just came in, class of 2025 is 40% diverse. So it's African American, Asian Pacific Islander, Native American, Hispanic, and we tend to lead the other service academies in the diversity and gender makeup of our midshipmen as compared to cadets. And then the other good news is we have higher graduation rates than the other service academies. So it's great. You've got this cohort that looks like America and is more female than ever before. But over the last 10 years, our our graduation rate runs around 90 to 92%. We are leaps and bounds beyond any private or public college. And the good news is you get a great education. For the last 5 years, the Naval Academy by U.S. News and World Report has been ranked the #1 liberal arts college in the country. That was a lot.
No, I love that, Soror. I have another question for you, Soror. How do you believe that some of the how do you believe in what keys do you believe are important to break systemic barriers, not just in leadership roles in the military, but in all industries? Like, what's some of the transferable skills we can use?
So, probably one of the hardest things we're going to have to deal with. So it's interesting, right? The Supreme Court. So for officers, you have got to have a college degree. And then the Supreme Court, I'm sure all of you are aware, last year said, okay, yes, all of these programs, you've got to, if you receive federal funding, it's got to go away. So basically, a reverse discrimination suit saying whites and Asians are discriminated against when seats are given to people of other color. I will tell you what was interesting to me is that the Supreme Court exempted the service academies. The Naval Academy, literally the minute after the Supreme Court issued its decision, the same group that went to the Supreme Court sued the Navy, saying, nope, you should not be allowed to use race. Well, with the Naval Academy incoming process, you don't get points for race, but it is considered. So the good news is literally last week, 175-page decision, judge said the way the Naval Academy does it is spot on. So now it's a matter of whether or not this group wants to try and go back to the Supreme Court and see if they'll remove this exemption. So I think the challenge is going to be, how do we now provide this truly needed fundamental college education for disadvantaged people who tend to be people of color? Is this going to have to be, we're going to have to look at greater support to historically Black colleges? I don't have the answers. I will tell you, not every corporation is going about this the same. I'm sure you've seen where some of them, like Tractor Supply, have said, hey, we're just going to drop all our DEI initiatives. Some of them, though, God bless them, are doubling down and saying, no, we've got to create opportunity for people who reflect our customer set in order to understand what our customer needs are, and have kept their affinity groups in place, for example. So one of the things we know, whether it's getting through college or getting through business, is that if you're a minority, you have unique experience sets. And it's not always sufficient to have a mentor or a sponsor. You have to have a cohort of people who have similar shared experiences so that you can learn from each other. I call this the quilting bee effect, right? So that when pioneer women were getting together once a month for that quilting bee, it was not about the quilts. It's about this exchange of wisdom. The women are the doctor of the house. They're helping farm. They've learned to shoot. So how do you exchange the wisdom of all these new experiences so that somebody who's new coming into this environment doesn't have to start, from the, scratch? They get this wisdom and it helps them come up quicker. So I think, you know, making sure if corporations aren't the ones that are going to say, nope, we're getting out of the whole affinity group, getting out of DEI, um, then it's probably going to be private organizations like the Deltas who say, let us see if there's things we can do. I will also tell you that systematically, it's also about policy, right? One of my favorite chiefs was Admiral Mullen, just a fantastic leader. When he became chief of naval operations, so in the Pentagon, the Gucci offices are all on the E-ring. It's the outer wing with windows. That's your first point when you're a senior officer that you get to start actually selecting your staff, your speech writer, your executive, deputy executive, and the idea is that it's not just that they're your staff. These are generally very talented younger officers, and you're exposing them to what happens sort of at the corporate Navy level. And it helps them make a better officer when they go back out to sea and they understand the inner workings of defense. One of the things Admiral Mullen said was, okay, here's the challenge with humans. We tend to pick people who look like ourselves. Ducks pick ducks. So he made a rule that for any job below admiral on the E-ring in the Navy, that when a slot opened up, you had to have more than one candidate, and one candidate had to be at least female, and one candidate had to be diverse. He said, I'm not telling you to pick them, but I'm telling you to give them the opportunity to compete. And admirals being admirals, they pick the best talent. Within a couple of years of him making that rule, the demographics of the E-ring changed. So there's always, when something's within your control, there's always policy that you can enact to make sure that there is opportunity there. And then, for most folks, it's the opportunity they need. They have the capability. They have the character. They just need the shot.
Thank you, Sir Howard. I have one question, then Madam President has a question. This question is from Tanya Kennard. She says, I'm currently on my 16th year serving in the Air Force. I'm one of 2 minority female first sergeants at my base. I notice some service members don't usually love having a female leader. What advice would you give on resilience, leading groups who may not be welcoming, and how to keep my commander abreast of the current climate with resistance from some members?
Well, I am not as familiar with the Air Force. For the Navy, when someone comes into command, within the first 100 days, there's supposed to be an assessment of the actual command climate. And so the kinds of issues you're talking about would pop up. If you are still dealing with individuals, not necessarily a cohort, but individuals who don't understand the chain of command, then that sounds like a training or counseling opportunity to myself. And I can't tell from the question if these are issues you feel you're personally absorbing, or if you feel like it's sort of filtering across the cohort. If you think it's more broad across the cohort, then absolutely, as a senior enlisted and advisor, it is probably worthwhile you go into that first commander in your chain of command and say, here's what I'm seeing. What I have found is that whatever you're seeing or hearing, you have to give concrete examples. So observations. It was this day, it was this date, it was 2 people And here's what happened. So very concrete examples make it easier for the commander to go, oh, maybe there's something here I need to look into. So I think that's the first hard step, isn't it? That if you think something's awry, getting that courage to go in and talk to the boss and go, something's awry. And here's why I think something's awry. This, and this. And here's what I think we ought to be doing about it.
Thank you, Soror Howard. Madam President?
Yes, Sarah Howard. And I'm speaking from my experience, but I want to know the Navy's policy on how do they handle women in the military as mothers when they have to go away on deployment or away on training. I know for many military women, I know that oftentimes they have to leave their little ones or their family. And it sounds like the Navy has advanced further than the other branches of the military in a lot of areas. So I was wondering what's their policies regarding women and during their pregnancy and as they have young children.
So if you're on sea duty and you become pregnant, you're taken off of sea duty, right?
Wow.
You can't. A ship is not a place to have a baby. So we take women off of sea duty and put them in a shore billet. And for the time of their pregnancy, they can, at their own request, they can request a year extension after the baby is born to stay ashore so that they have the first year with the child. What I find interesting though, and they have to have it, and it's a minimum of 3 months after the child's born, that we're not going to let you go back to sea duty. What I find fascinating is, and I don't think it's just Navy women. There's hardcore. We have women who ask for that to be waived. They want to get back to sea, and they're. On the other hand, this you'll appreciate this. I was walking through the mall in Virginia. I was a 3-star. I was on my way somewhere, and I had to stop and pick something up, and I was in uniform. And this woman came flying down the escalator. She was a master chief, right? And she's like, Admiral Howard, I'm a big fan. And she'd been at sea most of her life. She had 4 kids. And I said, how does that work? And because I didn't have kids. I have a husband, and that counts, but not quite the same. So and she's like, well, she goes, first of all, you want to be at sea during their teenage years. She said, but second of all, when you're on a ship, she said, you just got to do your job. You're being fed. Your clothes go off to laundry. She said, being on a ship for women is like being a man at home. So I said, okay, that's good. That's great feedback for me to understand that perspective. So no, you can take up to a year. And then we have, I think we have the longest amount of time across all the services for women to get back into shape, to take their PT test. And I wouldn't change that for anything. The other thing we do, and when I left, there was only 2 services doing this, Coast Guard and Navy. And I remember as vice chief pushing Air Force and Army, so I don't know if it's changed. We offer sabbaticals. So if you're an officer below the rank of 04, you're enlisted, you're invested 5 or 6 years. If you want to take 1, 2, or 3 years off from the Navy, for whatever reason, yeah, I want to spend the first 2 years of my life at home with my daughter. You apply for the sabbatical. We can't pay you because you're not working, but we got Congress to say we can still give you a commissary and your medical benefits. And some people go off, they take it and they go get a college degree. We had a SEAL leave for a year. He wanted to get his master's degree, then went right back into the fight. The payback is you owe double the amount. So if you take 1 year, you owe 2-year commitment. So if you take 3, you owe a 6-year payback to the Navy. For officers, the other thing we did was when they come back in, we changed their year group. Because we know for promotion purposes that if you have a gap of 3 years, you don't have those 3 years of experience sets that the people who stand on active duty. So we reset your year group so that when you come back, you have the same amount of experience sets with the people you're competing against. So by doing that, we've tracked every officer and enlisted who's ever taken a sabbatical. We've had women who took sabbaticals as 04, 2-year sabbaticals, make rank, go into command, make rank again, and go into command as an 06. So when you change the framework so people can leave and come back at the same place they left off, then they stay competitive. So it is an option. And one of my favorite stories when I was vice chief, we had this couple, and so 10% of our military women are married to other military members. We had a couple, they were both nuclear powered engineers. They were the same year group. She had a baby. He took the sabbatical for 2 years. He became the stay-at-home dad, and she stayed at sea. And then he said, here's the good news is, when I come back in, I'm now in a different year group than my wife, so we're not competing head-to-head for promotion.
Nice. It sounds like the Navy is far ahead, as I stated before. I know from my military experience, it was always a struggle for women, right? Especially if one is getting deployed or have to go away training and they're leaving there. So it caused a lot of fracture, really. I know a lot of women who have a fractured family because of that. But it sounds as if the Navy has worked on that, and it would be nice to see that roll over into the other services. They might have advanced some, but I don't think as much as the Navy have.
Yeah, I don't know why we were able to move out so differently and so far ahead. And I will tell you, throughout it all, none of it would have happened if we hadn't had the support of the Secretary of the Navy, different ones throughout the years. And so when to me, the neat thing about the Chief of the Navy, who like me, started off in support ships, but went into destroyers. She's been a fleet commander. She was also a vice chief. Now she's chief. Is the fact she raised 2 kids, right? Her youngest is in college right now, freshman in college. That we have figured out ways for families to support each other and service members to support each other while one part of the group is deployed. And that sort of thought process started before women came into the Navy, right? Nice. Because sailors always go to sea 6, 7, 8, 9 months, and it was always the spouse group, the families that would come together and take care of each other. And every ship has an ombudsman who helps, whatever issues are going on, helps get the families to the right place, has the ear of the commanding officer. And I think just because of the way the maritime domain is, we would not have been able to, women would not have been able to get to the policies that we needed for more support if the way the Navy had shaped hadn't already existed. And I mean, it's the same. I think where the services share problems are things like child development centers. There's never enough. But from what I understand, there's never enough on the outside world either. So that's one. Every year, all the services put more money into that. But literally at the unit level, it almost becomes the families and the service members helping each other in order to make the deployment successful.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, I'll jump in with one question from the chat. Samaya Johnson asked, with the proposed Secretary of Defense for the incoming Trump administration on record saying women shouldn't be on combat roles, what do you think his leadership will do to morale, and how do you think it will affect recruitment of women?
So I think we're going to have to wait and see when he's it doesn't sound like the Senate's just going to roll over. So he's going to have to get confirmed first. So the other thing is, if it's going to be hard, I think it's going to be harder on the Army and Marine Corps. So he's when he talks about combat, and he's clarified this, and it's clarified in his book, to him it's about land combat. I think, and like he says, I'm not talking. He said that I'm not talking about pilots. He's got to get past some women veteran senators, veterans like Tammy Duckworth. After he was nominated, I think she put out the first salvo. What does he think? I lost my legs in a bar fight? Really? So he's got to get through that. And then he's gonna have to make the case. So when you look at women in land combat, I think the combined armed forces is about 1.2 million serving members, because in order to become a ranger or to become infantry, whether it's Marine Corps or Army, you've got to meet those specialized standards. There's probably 5,000 women now in what I would consider to be the land combat arms. I think he's going to have a hard time making a case that 5,000 women has changed the readiness of 1.2 million cohort. But if he's confirmed, it'll be interesting to see what promises the Senate's going to extract from him in order for him to serve. And I before I would speculate over what would happen, I want to see if he actually gets confirmed first.
Thank you. We have another question from Robin Liverpool. Can you share a moment in your career that profoundly shaped your leadership philosophy?
So for me, I think it was pre-career with my mother telling me to, making sure you do the right thing. I would tell you about the time I was making 1 star. So my mother's prediction, if you've been given a lot, you're going to have to give a lot. I had a epiphany, and so let me tell the C story. So I, would have my day jobs, and then I'd have all this extra work as the senior woman out of the surface warfare community. Whether it was sitting on a task force that was looking at diversity or gender, or accompanying an admiral to go to something. And then I found, as a leader, one of the challenges was there's days I was just tired and not motivated. So when you make 1 star, they send you to finishing school. And they do a 360, and you get a coach, and they do all these psychological profiles, and anything you want to talk about, you can talk about to your coach at the end of 2 weeks. So I was excited. The Navy had picked for me, my coach was an African-American woman who was a psychologist. I said, well, that's great. So I went in, we went through my profile, and then I was just talking to her about what this whole motivation. And she just looked at me, then she goes, oh, Admiral, that's easy. Come here, lean in. I'm like, oh, I'm going to get the keys. I'm going to get the secret. She goes, Admiral, just fake it till you make it. It's like, how much are we paying this woman to coach me? And then, but I went back and thought about what she said. And then I realized the message was right. It was the way it was given to me. Because I was doing some reading, and I came across this quote from Maya Angelou. And it said, if you don't like something, change it. And if you can't change it, change your attitude. And I thought that's the whole point. Leaders have to be self-motivating. We have to perpetually change our attitude. And then that positive attitude, that, we're going to win, that's what permeates the command. And so absolutely, you're human. And then there's days it's going to be harder than others. And then that's the only person who can give you a good talking to is yourself. Change your attitude. Get after it. It's amazing what happens.
Thank you so much. And we'll take one more question from the chat. So we have Simone Harris. I really enjoyed your quilting bee analogy. On that topic, I would like to know more about how you balance input from your mentor/community and your own vision for your role as a leader, especially with the added pressure of being the first woman in your role.
Ooh, so we need to talk about some history here. So the whole, what I would consider this whole idea of mentorship came into the business world in the 80s, right? And then so the services started to think about mentorship and mentoring in the 90s. And then by the time my community was looking at it, I think I was already a captain. I already had like 21 years in. There was, of course, no one I worked for who looked like me, ever. But what I was blessed with were people who were great, to me, great leaders. And so what they gave me in terms of example is what I adopted. It's how you treat the sailor. And I remember one time talking to an admiral, and he said, hey, the secret to success in the Navy is you treat every sailor like they're an admiral. You let people know that they have value. They have value on the team, and it's not about what their job is, whether they're an engineer in the propulsion plant or the cook. They have value, and they add value to the team. And when they do what they're supposed to do to perfection, then that's when the mission is a success. And so for me, part of that then is, okay, you're communicating to these people, they have value and they're part of the team. Are you listening to them when they talk to you? I would say for every time someone talks to you, you ought to be about 3 times as much silent so that they keep talking to you about what's going on. I also, would make sure It's interesting. I think all the services have semi-annual counseling in requirements. And I was always astonished at the number of leaders who actually didn't do the counseling. So I always made a commitment. Every time I got promoted, I would decide who's the cohort that works for me, and then I'm going to do the counseling. I did that all the way up to 4-star. So that meant by the time I was 4-star, there were senior officers who worked for me, 3, 2, 1 stars, 06s who were direct reports to me, some enlisted who were direct reports to me. I'm doing the counseling. That worked out to about 40, 50 people a year, which meant once a week, I was doing a counseling session. And I would make sure they were at least 45 minutes. And if they went longer than that, they went longer than that. I remember one time I brought in a captain, I was a 1-star. He's like, I don't need any counseling. We ended up sitting and talking for 2.5 hours. And he walked out of there motivated and energized. And then the same thing was when new people would come in who were going to be at least 2 to 3. I wanted to have at least a 30-minute in-call with them. And even today, when I go back and I get asked to go back and speak to the Navy, I get people coming up and saying, I heard that this guy tells a story about, he did an office call with you. It's supposed to be 30 minutes and it ended up being an hour and 15 minutes. And I said, but think about it. Every time you sit down with a member of your team, they're getting to know you and what you think is important. And you're getting to know them and what they think is important. If you're a commanding officer of a cruiser and you have 100 missiles, you know the status of every single one of those missiles every morning. Is it in maintenance? Is it ready to shoot? What's its status? Every single morning you get briefed on that, and probably every night. Why don't you know your people that well? Is so-and-so full of round? Is there a problem in the family? What's the obstacles on their plate for them to be a success? And the obstacles may have nothing to do with the Navy. Maybe they're personal. But if you don't get to know your people and give them a chance to know you, and that means you have to listen to them, it's hard. It's really hard to build a over-the-top successful team.
Thank you, Soror Howard. I have one more question. If you can share it with me before we say our thank you. I know we are leaning on a shield with this extra time, but if you can talk just a little bit about your connection to the 6888 and our dear Soror who will be honored in Tyler Perry's new movie, which is one of our Red Talks and our Delta C TV screenings.
Yes, so one of the reasons I retired to Colorado is my husband and I wanted to be as far away from the Beltway as we could get. Oh man, so I know all of you recall the George Floyd murders and the reaction of the country. Well, that same year, 2020, Congress said, we're watching as the states are changing names, right? Names of buildings and streets named after Confederates. So they put into the National Defense Authorization Act the requirement for a commission to identify every asset in defense that was named after a Confederate, honors a Confederate, or honors the Confederacy, and then make a plan to change them all. And when I remember when that got passed, I was like, dang, pity those fools. Well, Secretary Austin got confirmed. 24 hours later, I get a phone call here in Colorado. He's like, hey, Michelle, yes, Mr. Secretary, I have this commission and I want you to serve on it. And I'm like, could I? I'll do anything for you, Secretary Austin, but could it be something else? We knew this was not going to be good. So there were 8 commissioners. We're still in the pandemic. We formed via Zoom. And then we started talking about how we were going to go about it. And we decided once we could travel, we're going to visit the communities We had to let the communities know it's not if, it's a when. These names are going to be changed. That's the law. So the question is, people in Georgia, Texas, Virginia, do you want to get us to a new name? Or do you just want to write your congressman and rail at him? And so once we went out and talked to the communities, people accepted the commission. I think going in person let them sniff us out. And then we started having town halls, and then we set up a website. We got recommendations, and Charity Adams' name came up several times. Then when we finally got to the point where we're going to name names, Fort Lee in Virginia is a logistics training hub, sustainment logistics. One of the names that had come up and had it when we went to visit in person, military people on the base and civilians off the base said, General Gregg. General Gregg he came into the Army in World War II, segregated Army, got commissioned as an officer. His first post-World War II assignment was at Fort Lee, and he wasn't allowed in the officers club because it was segregated. The one black officer on the post, right? He grows up, he becomes the first African-American to reach the rank of 3 stars when he retires. He retires to Virginia. He is a powerhouse in the community. So that's why the community wants him, the base named after him, because he's given so much back to individuals in the community as well as the soldiers on his base. And he was in 92, I think. So then when we got down to the final end, we talked as a commission and said, why don't we do a hyphenated name? Because Charity Adams was basically in logistics and sustainment. She had the one job they were allowed to do, sort the mail, but getting the mail and the parcels out was mighty important, and they did it way better. I mean, when they redeployed those women, it took 3 male battalions to keep up with what they had done in World War II. She was the highest ranking African-American woman in World War II because, like I said, women could only be a captain or a colonel, even before the law. And literally, when you think about the segregation of the services, what she achieved as a commanding officer, and the only one of a unit of women of color that deployed, it's remarkable. So we picked the name Gregg Adams, named after Lieutenant General Gregg and Charity Adams. The day it was 2023, I think it was May of 2023, when we had the changing name. General Gregg came, and I never seen a man so happy to go outside the officers club that now had his name on it that he couldn't get into. Charity Adams' kids were there. Descendants of the 6888 were there. It was not a change of, it wasn't a change of name service. It was like church in there. It was crazy. People yelling and shouting. And then, to my delight, after the service, there were a number of women in uniform who came up who were also Deltas. Said, "You were the commissioner. You have made this happen." I said, "Not just me, 7 other commissioners, but yes, we got the right name." So the PA has stayed, public affairs officer at Fort Lee has stayed in touch with us and let us know about Tyler Perry's film, and they're hoping they can also do a premiere at the base of the film at some point. And then I was just saying, just last month he sent me a picture. Kerry Washington, the Army's museum, Women's Museum, is on Fort Gregg Adams, and so she went to learn more about Charity Adams. There's a picture next to her of the new base logo, which has General Gregg and Major Adams, and she's standing next to it. So he sent me a snapshot of Kerry Washington. But every name that we came up with for a base, every name change was like a celebration, not just for the soldiers on the bases, but the communities outside. I know we had really great fits, and I am And I will tell you, I was a little concerned about, oh, golly, state of Virginia changing Fort Lee to Greg Adams. But I would tell you, when I was driving down the highway the day before the service, they had already changed the green signs on the highway. God bless the state of Virginia. And they, so that whatever way you're going to Fort Greg Adams, the day before, the words Fort Lee had disappeared. So that was a I know I hesitated with the secretary when he asked me, but I will say the 2 years I spent on the commission and what we got done is going to be a highlight of my life.
Thank you so much, Madam President.
Soror Adams, this has been a real learning curve, I believe, and a great experience just to hear your experiences as a woman who rose through the ranks of the Naval Academy. And it invoked a lot of nostalgia that I know I forgot about, right, through my military journey. So I want to thank you for that, helping me remember the small things, right, and the big things with that. But you gave us so much knowledge. You gave a different perspective for a career for many women. So I hope it's a lot of young women on here today just to think about what the Navy and other parts of the service offers. It can be an exceptional career, as you stated today, and offer a lot of opportunity. But I want to thank you for coming on today. Actually, today we honored you on our social media, on Instagram and Facebook. So everyone got to see who you are also and give them a little more time to research who you are if they're not on here this evening. And we would love to have you back anytime. We hope to meet you in person in the future, hopefully. But thank you again. And thank you everyone else for attending. Soror Duncan-Smith.
Thank you, Soror.
It is a high pleasure. Let me tell you, and we have to thank your line sister, Soror Smith, Colette Smith, who went out her way to make sure that we were able to get in contact with you. It is such a pleasure. So I want to take a screenshot of our ICC Soror Jones. If you can take a picture of us all smiling at one time, so we can have our square. I deeply appreciate it. 1, 2, 3. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Soror Howard, do you want to have any last words?
Yes, if I may, thank you. So I want to tell you, when Dr. Bev Smith got a hold of me about being an honorary member, I did not immediately say yes, because I get a lot of offers. Hey, we want to make, and I grew up through the Naval Academy and I knew nothing about sororities, nothing. I knew a little bit about fraternities because some of my male colleagues are part of fraternities, but I actually hadn't met anyone who'd come from ROTC who'd been a member of the sorority. So then I did my research and I was just blown away. The history of the deltas, the passion, the social service. And I said, you know what? I may have been in the military, but these women get it. They get public service, changing your community, changing your country, changing your world. And I thought I would be honored to be a sister to any one of these women. So I just want to say thank you. Thank you.
Well, we are on. I remember when you all were initiated and you led the Justice League down the aisle and you was marching. I said, look at her. The ace is on fire. you just, and I said, wow, she just, without knowing so much about you, we've learned so much about you since then. But the way your presence just was like, she's proud, she's happy to be a part of this organization, but she's also somebody you beamed power. You beamed special. And so we are honored to call you our soror also, you know. So as we wrap up, and Madam President said thank you, we want everybody to make sure that they come out on December 21st for our screening of the 6888, Tyler Perry's 6888, as we will salute our soror, Charity Adams Early. And we're also going to have a Red Talks, a special Red Talks with the National Association of Black Military Women and Hakeem Jeffries' office, who will send their Veterans Affairs person so that we can talk about what are some of the things that we should be advocating for and lobbying for Black women, specifically Black women veterans. And so we want you guys to be a part of that really, really important conversation. Madam President, you want to jump on that? Say anything about it?
I think it'll be phenomenal. Actually, as I was reading a lot this week, the reviews are wonderful. Everyone's raving about it, and it gives a different perspective for women, right? As they go forth, and it's a topic that needs to be uplifted that many didn't know existed. Right? The 6888, many were unaware. So I'm looking forward to that as well. And it just gives a different perspective, and you learn the history, our history, right? Because that's what it's about, our history, which oftentimes fall by the wayside, especially in the military perspective. So I encourage everyone to come out and hear and see and ask more questions, and bring young women to let them see what it can be as a career as well. So thank you again, Soror Howard, for being here with us today. And thank you to Arts and Letters. Our Arts and Letters committee does wonderful events. They have such a vision. And I must commend them all the time for their vision. Oftentimes it's not easy, but I commend you. It's just keep doing what you're doing. Okay, thank you again, Soros.
Thank you. Thank you. Goodbye, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good night.